There are several types of film holding devices available today for use with the Schick CDR digital sensor. A few that we're going to explore today and utilize in our clinic will be the digital Rin, the digital snap array, the adhesive and disposable bite tabs, and the wingers. So in front of me, we'll start with the Rin. And the digital Rin is basically just like your traditional intraoral Rin as far as the three components. The only difference is the bite tab has little clips on each side that will actually hold the sensor in place. So with this anterior Rin, we're going to put it together just like we did for traditional film, making sure that the circle is covering our bite tab where our sensor will be. And then this time, instead of placing a film into the slot, we're going to insert the sensor through the back part of the bite tab and then slide it down into the slot and clip it in place. It's now ready for use on an anterior periapical. Again, make sure that you have the front side of the sensor. The back side of the sensor is where the cable connects and has this large convexity. If you were to place this in here backwards, and let's say you had the back part of the sensor facing the source of radiation, you simply would not get an image on your computer screen. So with all of these Rins, just make sure that you're inserting the front. So here's how we would do the anterior one. And then moving on, the posterior digital Rin, again, exactly like traditional intraoral film, except for the clips here. And it's also assembled exactly in the same fashion by holding the bite tab, inserting the arm on the side, and then making sure that the aiming device circles the bite tab. So if we're going to be using a size 2 sensor, as we would with a posterior, we would then have to unplug the size 1 sensor from the remote and plug the size 2 in. So using the size 2 sensor, we would insert it just like we did previously, only this time it's going to be horizontal. And then the clips will be clipped around the sides of the sensor. So the only thing you have to be sure, other than making sure you have the correct side of the sensor, is also ensuring that the cable isn't kinked too much when you're clipping it into the Rin. And then when this is placed in the patient's mouth, which we'll go through in another demonstration, the cable will actually come out of the patient's mouth and just hang to the side. So for the bite wing, again, assembled in the exact same fashion as the traditional bite wing Rin, and making sure that the aiming device covers our bite tab. And then we will snap the sensor using the clips here. And then with the bite wing, another thing you want to double check is that the bite tab is in the middle of the sensor. That way you're getting equal portions of the maxillary arch and the mandibular arch. So those are your digital XCP Rins for use with the digital sensor. Next, we have a digital snap array, which it looks a little bit different than the traditional snap array, but it works exactly the same. Here is our bite tab, and the sensor will then be inserted in here into the slot. This is similar to the closing lever on the traditional snap array. And then this end will be for anterior films. So to use this, open it up, and this digital snap array is a little bit more flexible as well when compared to the traditional intraoral. And you're going to place your sensor into the slot. And again, depending on where you're working, your sensor will either be above the bite tab for maxillary or below the bite tab for mandibular. So depending on where we're working, once we have our sensor in place, you will then want to close the lever. And once you close the lever, it kind of pulls on the cable slightly, and that will cause the sensor to dip in. So with this digital snap array, you do constantly have to be readjusting to make sure that your sensor is straight and in place. So it helps to hold it right here. So this would be ready for use on maxillary posterior periapicals and utilize the exact same way as the traditional snap array. If we wanted to take an anterior periapical, we would leave the lever closed, and these little webbed feet here will hold the sensor in place. So the easiest way to do this is to insert one side of the sensor close to the bottom towards the cable, and then insert the other side. And then the little webbed feet get bent, so you'll have to straighten those out in order to hold it in place. And then you also want to push down a little bit to make sure that the patient will be biting as low on the sensor as possible to get the full tooth from incisal edge all the way to 2 to 3 millimeters of bone surrounding. So then this would be ready for use on an anterior periapical. And again, you would position this according to the appropriate teeth and then have the patient hold this in their mouth. The cord would just be draped out of the patient's mouth. For mandibular, it would come slightly up and be draped out as well. So that is the digital snap array. A couple of other digital film accessories that I have in front of me are these little bite tabs. And if you look, this is very similar to the Wren. It can actually be used with the arm and the aiming device of the Wren. The nice thing about these is that they're adhesive and they're disposable, and they're very secure, so you're not going to get a lot of movement with them. So you simply peel it off, just like a sticker, and you place it on the sensor according to where you're going to be working. And you can place this in the patient's mouth. This would be for a posterior periapical. You can place this in the patient's mouth just like this, or if you wanted the assistance of the arm and the aiming device, you would simply slide that into the holes on the side. One thing you do want to note with these disposable and adhesive bite tabs, the holes are a little bit smaller, so don't force the arm into the holes. You want it in there just good enough to hold it, or else you won't be able to get the bite tab off during sterilization without breaking it. So here's for posterior, and we also have bite tabs for anterior. Note how the anterior is vertical when compared to the yellow horizontal posterior. And again, we would place this right at the bottom of the sensor, and this would be ready for use on an anterior periapical. Or if we wanted to use our Wren, we would simply insert it into the side. And that would be our anterior bite tab. We also have the disposable and adhesive bite tab for bite wings, and those are red. And you simply peel it off and stick it as close to the middle as possible. You can readjust slightly to make sure that there is adequate sensor above and below the bite tab. That way you're getting an equal portion of the maxillary arch and the mandibular arch in occlusion. The bite tab does not have any holes on it to connect to an arm and an aiming device. So the bite wing bite tab would just be utilized like this, and the operator would configure their own horizontal and vertical angulation. Two final accessories that we have are called wingers, and we have those available for anterior periapicals and bite wings, and they are also disposable. And these are basically just plastic sheaths that fit over the sensor itself. So for a bite wing, we would just slide this on. It's really pretty similar to a bite wing loop. And again, make sure this is even, and this would be ready to use for your bite wing survey. The anterior also would just slide over. And this is where the patient would be biting, so you want to make sure that that's as low on the sensor as possible. And so this would be ready for use on an anterior periapical. The additional accessories such as the wingers and the bite tabs that are adhesive are all disposable. The digital XCP Rin and the digital snap array are all sterilized in the same manner that a traditional snap array or Rin would be processed. So after patient use, they would be placed in the ultrasonic and then bagged accordingly. Again, when you're bagging Rins, it's essential that you take each component apart to prevent rusting, and then you will bag the arm and aiming device together and the bite tab on its own. Then those will be ran through the autoclave like your other instruments. And that's just a brief overview of our film holding devices for the digital sensor.